have to, to forgive anybody. I'm not a god.
But within your own self, do you not have the power to forgive white people?
I mean, I think I have the right to keep what I feel. I was not able to go and bury my mother. And I lost a lot of friends and relatives in struggle. But more than that, there's never been a time in the history of human beings where colonizing or occupational forces apologized and said, sorry that we took your land and we took all your minerals and we made all these billions off of your backs and we still have a business here. Business is there, but here's 500 trillion pounds to
Hugh Masekela, in an interview with the BBC Hard Talk program, talking about how he's never really developed the capacity to forgive white people. And he was asked why. He said, because one, he's not God, he does not have the power to forgive. But then he goes on into, of course, the theory that, in fact, never been in the history of liberation struggles has the oppressor ever come back and apologize for taking land and resource away. This is very familiar theme and familiar territory in the liberation movement, of course, and the civil rights movement in terms of what do blacks get in terms of reparations out of Jim Crow slavery. Take a listen again to Hugh Masekela.
In, for instance, University of Cape Town removing the statue of Cecil Rhodes.
Yeah.
You backed them in that kind of, and it was removed after it was, damaged, defaced.
I think that, personally, I think that the issues that should be dealt with is the fact that nothing much has changed in South Africa except that we vote, but economically we don't own the country as a people who were oppressed. We own less than 3% of land to start with. We don't own any of the businesses or any of the economy. There are few Africans in there who have been taken in to be part of the businesses, but they're dropped in the ocean. And that is the reality of the situation.
Nothing has really changed in South Africa, according to this 2015 interview only 3 years ago by Hugh Masekela to the BBC. He said blacks in South Africa own less than 3% of land, and economically they are powerless. That the only thing that they have in South Africa is just being able to vote. Take a listen.
Economic wealth in South Africa is still concentrated in the hands of white South Africans.
Not only in community planning, and I mean, there's still architectural apartheid, there's town planning apartheid. And it is never, in fact, I usually make a joke. I said, well, if we're going to legitimize everything, maybe we should also, instead of outlawing apartheid, we should really legitimize it because it's still in our midst.
But, there are many, and I cite Trevor Manuel when he was a government minister in 2013, and, he says you can't undo all those decades of apartheid in a short space of time. It's just not possible. He says, unless you're a magician, the legacy of apartheid runs too deep and too far to reverse in a short period.
Yeah, well, I'm not a minister,
But do you agree with that sentiment that it's going to take more than 20 years to reverse?
I don't think that the onus is going to come from the administration. I think the political industrial will has to come from those people who monopolize the economy of South Africa. If the goodwill doesn't come from them, then it's just been a one-sided reconciliation.
And what do you make of the record of the ANC 20 years in power? Because, of course, we know there are various styles.
Every liberal movement...
The most inequality has actually expanded under the ANC.
Most liberation movements are fantastic during liberation. But when it comes to governing, we always have to ask, can you remember any liberation movement that has governed well? I don't remember any, because it's two different things. But then, they inherit the power, and then from there you wait and hope for the best. But so far, we haven't seen it in South Africa, not with Mandela, not with Mbeki, not with, the present government.
Is that why you said just this year we have crime, corruption, and a country, South Africa, that is fast turning into a rubbish dump? That's a very, very, very strong language there.
It's a strong language. Well, I think it's much worse than that. you know, because if you're free and you can't walk around at night in your own country, then what kind of freedom?
A new constitution, people's human rights are, enshrined constitutionally, gay rights and so on.
It's all paper stuff, you know. There's gay rights, but like gay people have a rough time in the townships, you know. So, and you can write stuff down and you can decree laws, but are they for real? I mean, you have problems here in England. You know, and England is like thousands of years old, but it has like its fair share of everything from xenophobia to poverty to...
Well, you mentioned xenophobia, and of course we all saw that very ugly face of, actually not xenophobia really, but Afrophobia, where South Africans, black South Africans, turned on other Africans working in their midst, be they Nigerian, be they Somali. They trashed their properties and their businesses, and people were fearful for their lives.
Yeah.
What did you feel? Because, I mean, in fact, that clip we played earlier on is about the migrant workers, and you remember migrant workers from Mozambique.
It's the legacy of the Cecil Rhodes and the British colonialism, that originally when they brought non-South African, indigenous Africans to South Africa, they could only come in as indentured servants or migrant labor, and they were segregated from the South African the indigenous population. They lived in single men's hostels, and the audience, I mean, the community was manipulated into thinking they were superior. So it's a very old thing. It comes from...
So you're blaming the old apartheid system and white colonial rule.
I blame colonialism.
For the attacks that we saw, because...
I blame colonialism for all chaos all over the world.
All right. Huey Masekela tells the BBC, I blame colonialism for all chaos around the world. And of course, he talked about the fact that less than 3% of blacks, blacks own less than 3% of land, of property in South Africa. You know, now Malcolm X says that land is the basis of all power. If you have no land, you have no power. South Africa is politically liberated, but economically in chains still, because it still does not have, black South Africans are not economically empowered. Sounds like a familiar story here on this side of the ocean in terms of the state of Black America. And that is a very fascinating interview that Huey Masekela gave, really giving an optimistic tone, if you will, or perhaps a pessimistic view, if you will, about just his take. He sounded like a man who's disappointed, a man who's seen a lot, and basically said nothing has changed, and that in fact, colonialism is the basis of all chaos, is responsible for all chaos. And he was asked, can you forgive white people? He said he does not have the capacity to forgive because, in fact, that he is not God, and that he does not have the power to basically give forgiveness or to forgive somebody, and basically said in the history of oppression, in the history of colonial movements, never before has the oppressor really apologized for resources that they've taken away. Again, this is familiar theme and territory in terms of the issues that we discuss here every day on this program, but across the nation as well. The state of Black America. I think we can take Huey Masekela's conversation and put it right at the center of the disintegration of Black America. We'll be right back after this break. I'm Ben Thompson.